Steam rises from a perfectly prepared meal, the kind of quiet domesticity that shouldn't exist for two high school neighbors living alone. He takes a bite, the flavor hitting home before he even realizes he's smiling. Mahiru watches him with that subtle, expectant gaze, her expression softening when he finally speaks. Thanks for the food. At school, she's the angel, untouchable, flawless, and perpetually surrounded by a wall of admiration. But here, in the quiet of an apartment hallway, that distance vanished long ago. What started as a chance encounter in the rain has blossomed into a routine of shared dinners and comfortable silences. They've moved past the formalities, finding a rhythm that feels more like home than just being neighbors. The evening took a sharp turn when an out-of-season horror flick started flicking across the screen. He offers her an out, noticing the way her grip tightens on the cushion, but her pride is currently louder than her common sense. She stares straight ahead, her voice only trembling slightly as she insists, "I'm not the least bit scared." The bravado doesn't last 5 minutes. With every creak from the TV speakers, she inches across the couch, a slow-motion migration towards safety. Her face is pale, her eyes darting toward the remote as he realizes just how deep over her head the angel has waited. A shrieking face explodes onto the screen, and the last of Mahiru's composure disintegrates. She doesn't just flinch, she lunges, burying her face against his arm and gripping his sleeve like a life jacket in a storm. He can feel the frantic thud of her heart through his shirt as she locks on. The room falls into a sudden heavy silence as he clicks the power button. Mahiru is still there, trembling against him, her pride finally silenced by genuine terror. He looks down at her, realizing that if this had gone on any longer, they both would have hit their breaking point. Mahiru looks up, her eyes glassy and shimmering with unshed tears that make the school's idol look heartbreakingly human. She clings to the blanket, her voice a small, wounded thing as she admits the fear that kept her glued to the screen. "But you would have laughed at me if I ran as soon as it came on, wouldn't you?" He tries to soothe her with logic, telling her there's no shame in struggling with ghosts, but that only fuels the blush creeping up her neck. She hides her face, muttering about how embarrassing it is to be a teenager and still be afraid of things that go bump in the night. The fear is slowly being replaced by a defensive pout as she recovers her footing. She reminds him that she's only human, even if the rest of the world thinks she's an angel. When he asks what else she can't handle, she turns her head with a sharp, indignant huff. Not telling. Seeing her upset is a small price to pay if it means she's no longer paralyzed by fear. Usually she's the one taking care of him, but tonight, the roles shifted just enough for him to feel the weight of her trust. Several minutes pass, the background noise of a variety show providing a much-needed buffer. He tries to start a conversation, but the way she's still hunched over, staring blankly with half-lidded eyes, tells him everything he needs to know. Turning off the program was just the beginning. The shadows in the corner of the room are still far too long for her liking. The moment the phone picks up, the peace of the apartment is shattered by a maternal hurricane. Amane stares into the middle distance, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fatigue, as his mother skips the pleasantries and goes straight for the jugular. "When will you start dating, Mahiru-chan?" He lets out a sigh that feels like it's draining years off his life, burying his face in his hand, as he tries to maintain the lie that they don't feel that way about each other. Shihoko isn't buying a single word of his denial. She's practically vibrating through the speaker, her voice dripping with the kind of glee only a mother who thinks she's won a bet can manage. Amane slumps further into the couch, the weight of her suspicion pressing down on him as she delivers the knockout blow. "But now you're even bringing one home." Desperate for a lifeline, a man begs for his father to take the phone, hoping for a shred of masculine solidarity. His mom just laughs, clearly enjoying the chaos she's stirred up, before handing the device over to a man who looks far too relaxed for someone married to a human tornado. Amane practically pleads with the receiver, begging his dad not to believe the whirlwind of rumors his mother is spinning. But Shuto is a veteran of this household. He's already pieced together the domestic reality from the background noise. He cuts through the excuses with a simple, devastating summary. "In short, your next-door neighbor is making you dinner, isn't she?" The teasing drops away, replaced by the quiet, heavy observation of a father who knows his son better than he'd like to admit. Shuto's voice softens, acknowledging that Mahiru isn't just a neighbor, she's a girl Amane has chosen to let in. He lets the realization hang in the air between them. "I also know you trust Shiina-san a lot. It's not all warm, fuzzy feelings, though." Shuto delivers a firm reminder that kindness is a two-way street, warning Amane not to become complacent in her care. The word surprise underscores the sharp jolt to Amane's system, as his dad tells him, "Don't just let yourself get spoiled by her." Shuto's parting words hit like a physical weight, carrying the history of a boy who once kept the world at arm's length. He doesn't just see a potential girlfriend, he sees the miracle of his withdrawn son finding someone who sees past the thorns. He's just glad that there's one more person who can see Amane for who you really are. Amane sits in the silence of his room, the shadow of his middle school years flickering briefly in his thoughts before his dad threatens to ruin the mood by visiting. The panic returns instantly, a familiar frantic energy as he tries to keep his parents from descending upon the apartment like a tactical strike team. He grips the phone tight, his final plea clear: "You'll startle Shiina." Unsweetened coffee with a pinch of sugar. To most of the world, she's the unreachable angel, and he's just a shadow in the back of the classroom. But here, in the quiet of this apartment, the labels start to peel off. Mahiru remembers the start of this routine, how Amane used to be nothing more than a curt, untidy, and unassuming boy. The rhythmic wipe of a rag against the table is the new soundtrack to their afternoons. Mahiru pauses, her hands still against the polished surface, looking around at a room that actually looks like a human lives in it. She lets out a soft breath of approval, noting that "I see you're keeping it nice and tidy." Amane groans at the memory of the trash heap his life used to be, while Mahiru recalls the disaster it took to get him here. He's taking her lessons to heart, even if he claims it's just to avoid bad karma. A small giggle escapes her, the kind she never shows at school, as she reminds him his old lifestyle was damaging your health. The dishes are done, and Anane isn't letting her lift another finger. He directs her to the sofa with a firm nudge, leaving Mahiru to sink into the cushions with a soft thump. As she watches him move toward the coffee maker, a stray thought flickers. What would his life look like if she'd never walked through that door? He's still sloppy, still lacks the basic survival skills of a functional adult, and yet, he has this personality that just works. Unlike every other guy who stares at her like she's a trophy on a pedestal, Amane sees her. This comfortable distance they've found, it feels exactly right. The steam rises from a heavy white mug as he holds it out. It's a simple gesture, not just the clean dishes, but a drink made just for her. He drops onto the couch near her, his voice low and casual as he mutters, "Here." They sit in a silence that isn't quite empty. Mahiru finds herself tracking the way he holds his cup, her eyes lingering a second too long until he catches her. Her head snaps away instantly, hiding behind the steam of her own drink as he asks, "What's wrong?" She tries to play it cool, complimenting his diligence, but she can't help adding that he's still sloppy. Amane doesn't get defensive. He just lets out a soft, self-deprecating laugh that melts the last of the tension. Well, I can't deny it. The world sees a cold, disinterested boy, but Mahiru is looking at the truth. He's warm. Not just the heat from the coffee in her hands, but the steady, quiet presence of someone who genuinely cares. It's so relaxing, just being with him. Mahiru starts fretting about costs and the extra effort he's putting in, trying to maintain that polite boundary. But Amane shuts it down with a blunt honesty that leaves no room for argument. He takes a slow sip of his coffee and looks her straight in the eye. "I'm just doing what I want to do." He even threatens to drink hers too if she keeps hesitating, claiming he can't have her getting an upset stomach. Mahiru blinks, her cheeks flushing a soft pink. She pulls the mug closer, deciding she'll happily drink it herself. The steam hits her face as she takes a real sip. It's not bitter like she expected. There's milk and just a tiny pinch of sugar, the exact way he knew she'd like it. It has a calming, sweet taste that fills her chest with a different kind of heat. It's so warm. The air finally has that bite to it, the kind that turns your breath into clouds and makes you want to live inside a heater. For Mahiru, winter means bundling up in layers of wool and silence, but the walk home is cut short when a familiar figure appears by the apartment entrance. It's Amane, looking like he hasn't checked a weather report in weeks. They end up sharing the elevator, and the closer they get, the more Mahiru's brow furrows. She's practically a marshmallow of scarves and coats, while he's just there. In a jacket that looks about as thick as a sheet of paper. She gives him that look, the one that says she's already calculating his future medical bills. "Those clothes aren't you cold at all?" Amane tries to play it off, claiming he's got 100% cold resistance, but the biological evidence is working against him. Mahiru leans in, narrowing her eyes as she audits his face for signs of frostbite. She doesn't need a thermometer to see he's freezing. The proof is right there on his skin. Your ears and nose are red. When he admits he just forgot to bring any actual winter gear when he moved, the angel persona cracks for a second to let out a pure, unfiltered judgment. Amane figures it's fine since school is close, but Mahiru isn't having any of it. She looms over him with a menacing aura that says his health is no longer his business. It's hers. You're utterly hopeless. Realizing he's genuinely stressed her out, Amane softens his stance, giving her a quiet apology for the worry. He promises he's being careful, but Mahiru just lets out a small, huffy sigh. It's that classic domestic stalemate. He's trying to be a man, and she's trying to keep him from becoming an ice sculpture. The air in the hallway feels heavy as she looks up at him, her eyes wide and searching, softened by the wool of her scarf. There's no tease left in her voice, just a genuine, aching sincerity that catches him off guard. It's the look of someone who can't stand the thought of you hurting yourself. Do take care of yourself, okay? Amane promises to buy some proper gear, but he can still feel her eyes on him. Even when he turns away, Mahiru is still staring, her gaze fixed on the back of his head with a focus that's almost clinical. When he finally asks what's up, she ducks behind her scarf with a lightning-fast nothing. They step into the elevator, the mechanical clank filling the gap between them. Amane talks about toughing it out until the end of the semester, but Mahiru isn't listening to his words. She's staring at his neck at the bare skin exposed to the draft, and her brain is clearly already 3 steps ahead at the clothing store. Cut to the shop, where Mahiru is desperately trying to pick out the perfect scarf. She's hyperfixated on the quality, but the store clerk sees right through the angelic focus. When the woman beams and asks, "A present for your boyfriend, perhaps?" Mahiru's composure doesn't just slip, it enters low Earth orbit. "No, it isn't," she stammers, practically vibrating with embarrassment while clutching the black wool. The steam rises between them, a quiet domestic fog that smells like miso and home. For a guy who used to live on convenience store junk, this isn't just dinner, it's a miracle in a ceramic bowl. Amane takes a sip, lets the warmth settle in his chest, and can't help the sigh that escapes. Delicious. Mahiru just bows her head, her own gratitude coming out in a soft, practiced breath. She's watching him eat with that same clinical focus she had at the clothing store, but this time, it's about the menu. She asks if he has any strong food preferences, reaching out to pass the soy sauce like it's a baton in a relay race. Amane admits he's got favorites. Eggs are top tier, but Mahiru's already 2 steps ahead, revealing she's already got some prepared just for him. Amane isn't a picky guy, but everyone has a breaking point. He visualizes a bowl of something glowing neon red, the kind of spice that burns twice, and admits he probably couldn't handle the red hot or the truly bitter. Mahiru listens, her eyes dropping to her own chopsticks as she processes this data. It's not just small talk, she's mapping out his entire palate, making sure his sanctuary never has a sour note. He takes another drink, the ceramic cool against his palm. He's never had to tell her what he dislikes because, honestly, the thought never crossed his mind. When it comes from her kitchen, the usual rules of like and dislike don't seem to apply anymore. Amane drops the casual tone and looks her right in the eye, his voice dropping an octave with pure sincerity. "I know that you'll still make it taste delicious anyway." It's a total knockout. Mahiru's eyes go wide, a sharp gulp being the only sound in the room as a crimson heat starts at her collar and races to her ears. She tries to shake it off, her hands trembling slightly against her knees as she mutters a defensive Amane watches her, realizing he might have been a little too honest. He sees the angel looking completely undone, her face buried in her hand in a desperate attempt to hide the sheer impact of his praise. He's not just eating food, he's consuming the care she puts into every seasoning, and he'd happily clean his plate every single day just to show her how much it matters. He gives her a small, lopsided smile, the kind that bypasses all her defenses. "Thanks for everything." Mahiru looks like she's about to short-circuit. She ducks behind her cup, taking a frantic sip of tea just to have something to do with her hands. Amane, oblivious to the chaos he's causing, just tilts his head. "Is that so?" She finally looks up, her eyes still shimmering with that lingering heat. She makes a visible effort to sound composed, to be the diligent girl who isn't affected by a few kind words. Praise me all you want, but it won't get you anywhere, okay? It's a transparent bluff, and they both know it. Amane exhales a little chuckle, holding his bowl out like an olive branch. He could really go for seconds, and Mahiru reaches for the ceramic with a speed that borders on desperate. It's the perfect excuse to break eye contact, her fingers brushing against his for a fraction of a second before she snatches the bowl away. She's gone before he can even say please. Amane watches the pitter-patter of her footsteps as she flees toward the kitchen, the angel leaving a trail of pure, flustered energy in her wake. He leans back, resting his chin in his hand with a newfound realization. Apparently, when you compliment her sincerely, she really can't handle the heat. The kitchen retreat was just a temporary fix. Back in the living room, the atmosphere is heavy with a strained, comfortable silence that only happens when someone is trying way too hard to look busy. Amane leans over the back of the sofa, breaking the quiet with a simple question about her reading material. Mahiru jumps, her eyes going wide as she pulls the book tight against her chest, like it's a state secret. She looks up with a flustered pout, demanding, "Do I have to tell you, Amane-kun?" She isn't actually trying to hide it, she's just terrified of the angel looking too eager. Slowly, she tilts the cover toward him, the title staring back at him in bold letters, "Egg Dishes from Around the World." She avoids his gaze, muttering, "I don't want you to think I'm doing you a favor." Her fingers knot together, twisting in her lap as she admits the truth she's been trying to bury under all that politeness. It wasn't a random choice, she bought it for him. The blush spreads all the way to her ears as she whispers, "If I'm going to cook anyway, I might as well prepare something you would enjoy." The psychological pressure hits a boiling point, and Mahiru literally starts to steam, her head dropping as she tries to vanish into her own collar. Amane doesn't help the situation, leaning in with genuine oblivious excitement to ask, "So you'll make them for me?" The barrier finally breaks. Amane slides into the space beside her, and suddenly the angel and her neighbor are huddled over the same page, pointing out spices and wondering about flavors like they've been doing this for years. Amane watches her profile, his own expression softening into something dangerously honest. He sees the way her eyes light up when she talks about cooking, and the praise just slips out before he can filter it. He leans a little closer, his voice quiet and steady as he delivers the finishing blow. "That's because your food tastes so good." That's the limit. Mahiru faceplants directly into a cushion with a muffled pomp, unable to survive the sheer weight of his sincerity. From deep within the fabric, her voice comes out small and defeated, admitting, "You sure have a way with words." Amane just smiles, the social battle won by the simplest weapon, being a decent human being. Mahiru peeks over her cushion, her face still a bright, radiating pink as she tries to reclaim some dignity. "Please sit down," she grumbles, waving him off. "It's bad manners." The girl everyone treats like an untouchable idol doesn't usually let her guard down, but behind closed doors, Mahiru Shiina is currently losing a battle to a stuffed animal. She rubs her face against the soft fabric, squishing the teddy bear's cheeks with a rhythmic, quiet intensity. It's a moment of pure, unscripted comfort, a heavy sigh escaping her as she lifts the bear into the air, staring into its bead eyes as if searching for a secret. She collapses back onto her bed, the bear pulled tight against her chest as she stares at the ceiling. The domestic routine with Amane has become her sanctuary, but this gift, this specific physical proof of his care, is different. Her voice is barely a whisper in the empty room as the realization hits her. To think he would give me a birthday present. I wonder when I last received one. She rolls onto her side, the warmth of the bear clashing with the cold memories of school hallways. For years, she kept her birthday a state secret. When she was younger, friends would ask what she got or how she celebrated, their voices full of a casual curiosity that felt like a trap. She learned to stay silent because she didn't want their pity, didn't want them to see the hollow space where a celebration should have been. Her eyes drift shut as she remembers the envelopes. No cards, no handwritten notes, just a transactional delivery from a mother who never once cared. Every time she reached for one, there was a tiny flickering hope that this time it might be a birthday card, a hope that was crushed by the cold reality of the paper inside. Before long, she just stopped mentioning it entirely. The angel persona wasn't just a mask, it was a target. As she grew older, the gifts started coming, not because people cared about her, but because they wanted to win her. They wanted the status of being near the idol. It made her recoil from kindness, turning every gift into a debt she didn't want to owe. But as she pats the bear's head now, she knows this is different. She remembers the look on Amane's face, how he didn't make a grand gesture out of it. He just handed it over like it was nothing, calling it a bonus so she wouldn't feel the weight of the obligation. He gave her an out, a way to accept it without the pressure, because he actually understood the girl behind the wings. She hugs the bear tighter, a small, genuine smile tugging at her lips. He isn't a stranger trying to buy her favor anymore. He's just Amane. A blush creeps up her neck as she mumbles into the fur. The one who gave you to me is a strange person. He's the only one who doesn't follow the script. She can see it so clearly. Amane, the boy who usually looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, standing in a toy store surrounded by fluff and bows. He's straightforward but struggles to be honest with his own heart. A soft foo-foo escapes her. The mental image of his awkwardness while buying this for her is the best gift of all. His compassion feels entirely instinctive, the kind of sincerity that only comes from being raised in a home filled with genuine affection. She sees a vision of a happy family in her mind, the kind of warmth she's only ever observed from a distance. He didn't just buy a bear, he shared a piece of that nature with her. "I'm so envious," she whispers, the words heavy with a lifetime of being on the outside looking in. She knows Amane didn't want anything in return. No favor, no status, no angel to parade around. Just her happiness. That's the simplest, most terrifyingly kind thing anyone has ever done for her. A single tear spills over, catching the light as it falls. This is the moment the sanctuary becomes real. It's the first time in her life she hasn't had to perform to earn a gift. Her heart swells with a quiet, overwhelming gratitude because, for the very first time, a gift, not for the angel, but for me. As sleep finally begins to pull at her, she clutches the bear like a lifeline, her mind already moving toward the morning. She doesn't have the words to tell him everything yet, so she'll use the language they both understand. Tomorrow, she'll make him those dashimaki omelets he likes, the ones she spent all that time studying just for him. The gym floor is a chorus of rhythmic squeaks and heavy breathing. Amane is right in the thick of it, lungs burning as he tracks the ball's arc. The shot clatters off the rim, a missed chance, and he's already spring-loading for the rebound. He doesn't see the accident coming, just feels the jarring thud as he hits the floor. The silence back at the apartment is twice as loud as the gym. Mahiru isn't moving. She's just staring at the white gauze wrapped around Amane's wrist with an expression that looks dangerously like a storm front. Her voice is low, clinical, and terrified, all at once when she finally asks, "What happened to your hand?" Amane tries the "it's just a scratch" routine, insisting it's a light sprain that won't change a thing. He even offers a weak wave of his good hand to prove it. But Mahiru's gaze is fixed, dark, and immovable. To her, this isn't a minor injury, it's a personal failing on her watch. Amane thinks he has an out. He can just use his left hand for the chores. He's logicking his way out of being pampered until Mahiru drops a truth bomb that leaves him speechless. She leans in, her eyes shadowed with a terrifying kind of sweetness, and asks, "Are you implying that you were capable of doing housework before?" This isn't just about laundry. It's about the memory of her own sprained ankle, and the way he carried her when she had no one else. The angel mask slips, revealing a girl who just wants to square the ledger of kindness. She delivers the final blow with a soft, pleading look. "Let me repay the debt." Amane realizes his pride is officially outmatched. Suddenly, Amane is the most protected person in Japan. Mahiru is everywhere at once, prepping easy-to-grab onigiri, wrestling with the laundry, and practically ordering him to stay on the couch like a king. He starts to offer a protest, but she shuts him down with a look that says his only job is to be looked after. Then comes the ultimate test of his sanity, the hand-feeding. Mahiru holds the chopsticks with clinical precision, leaning in close enough that he can smell the soap on her skin. She isn't teasing, she's dead serious about his nutrition. Here, open wide. Amane's brain is currently short-circuiting as he stares at the food, then at her, then at the floor, praying the floor will open up and swallow him. The guilt finally outweighs the embarrassment. Amane takes a breath, his throat tight as he prepares to break the spell. He reaches out, his left hand moving with a fluid, practiced grace that he's been hiding this whole time. The chopsticks click together perfectly. I'm ambidextrous. Mahiru watches him eat a perfect bite with his off hand. The realization hits her like a physical weight. All that frantic worry, the careful feeding, the hovering, it was all for a guy who could have used a fork 10 minutes ago. The pink tint on her cheeks starts at her neck and rapidly expands until she's practically glowing with mortification. The angel has officially left the building, replaced by a girl who wants to crawl into a hole and die. She finally finds her voice, and it's an octave higher than usual. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amane just looks away, knowing exactly how much trouble he's in for letting it go this far. Mahiru buries her face in her hands, the absolute picture of a defeated caretaker. Amane can't stand to see her actually upset, so he leans into the awkwardness. He offers a small, genuine smile, telling her that if she's really that eager to help, he's happy to play along until the bandage comes off. Mahiru takes the bait, but she's not going back to the gentle feeding from before. Her embarrassment has turned into a high-speed offensive. She's not just feeding him now, she's practically launching food at his face to hide her own blushing. "Here, next, have this." It's a domestic drive-through at Mach 5. Mahiru is a blur of motion, her eyes swirling with pure panic-driven determination as she shoves another bite forward. Amane is barely keeping up, gasping out that she's going way too fast, while she insists he has to eat it while it's warm. The sanctuary is currently a food-fueled disaster zone. The only sound in the room is the rhythmic scratch of a pen against paper as Mahiru stays locked in her angel study mode. Then, the sky decides to join the conversation with a rumble that shakes the floorboards, and the world simply vanishes. In the suffocating ink of a power outage, Amane's voice is the only thing keeping the room from feeling like a void. He fumbles for his backpack, realizing his only light source is currently out of reach. "Could we use your phone's flashlight for a bit?" Amane looks over and sees a silhouette that isn't moving. The angel has folded in on herself, a small, trembling shape huddled against the sudden silence of the dark. He reaches out to check on her, but the second his fingers brush her shoulder, Mahiru goes into full-blown fight or flight mode. It's a chaotic symphony of a yelp, a stomp, and the sound of someone losing a wrestling match with the furniture. She doesn't just jump, she undergoes a complete structural collapse right onto the floor. The lights might be out, but the air is thick with the heat of her absolute mortification. She's face down on the table now, trying to dissolve into the wood rather than face the fact that she just did a gymnastic routine out of pure fear. What a blunder. Mahiru attempts to pull herself together, her movements wobbly and uncertain in the gloom. Amane doesn't tease her, doesn't even laugh. He just reaches out a hand, offering a steady point in the pitch-black room. She looks up, her eyes wide and searching his face for even a hint of sarcasm, but she finds nothing but his usual blunt sincerity. He lets her hand rest in his, a solid weight that anchors her to the present. "I'm not that mean." They migrate to the couch, sitting close enough that the warmth between them becomes more noticeable than the chill of the rain outside. When he asks if she's always been bad with the dark, she doesn't give him a practiced angel answer. She admits she just hates the way the light suddenly vanishes, leaving everything empty. She puts on a front to play it cool, insisting it's not that she's scared, but the way her fingers tighten their grip on his hand tells a completely different story. She's clinging to him like a lifeline, and for once, she isn't trying to hide the desperation. The storm outside feels miles away as they sit in the quiet glow of their proximity. She whispers the truth, a confession that carries more weight than any apology. "It's not the light she needs, but the feeling of not being alone. It gives me peace of mind then." With a sudden, clinical click, the electricity rushes back into the room, drowning their shared moment in a harsh, fluorescent glare. The sudden light is like a physical blow. They both freeze, wide-eyed and blinking, as the reality of their intertwined hands becomes impossible to ignore. Amane mumbles something about checking the appliances just to have an excuse to break the contact, his own face starting to burn as the peace of mind evaporates into pure, unadulterated awkwardness. Mahiru doesn't walk, she scurries, her head down and her ears glowing a bright, unmistakable red. Amane stays behind, touching his own cheek, and trying to figure out when the room got so incredibly hot. He heads to the kitchen, pretending to be busy with the breaker, but the distraction doesn't work. He catches a glimpse of his own expression in the reflection and feels a wave of disbelief. He looks completely rattled, his usual stoic mask shattered by a few minutes in the dark. What's with that face? A delivery box arriving at the door is usually just a chore. But when it's from Amane's mother, it's basically an emotional grenade with a shipping label. Mahiru's already peeking from the hallway like a curious kitten while Amane signs off on a keep-chilled mystery. He puts on his best poker face, saying it's just some stuff from his mom, but they both know Shihoko doesn't do just some stuff, It's usually an apology for being a chaotic wingman. They crack the box open to find premium pickled fish from a high-end shop, a far cry from the typical snacks you'd send a teenager. Amane realizes his mom is playing the long game. She knows Mahiru loves the high-quality stuff, and she's essentially bribing her way into being the favorite mother-in-law. He can't help but wonder, is this really something you send to high schoolers? Mahiru is already planning the menu, her eyes scanning the labels with professional intensity. She spots a specific pack, Kyoto style, marinated in sake lees. While Mahiru geeks out over the ingredients, Amane is just happy to see her smiling, deciding he'll definitely have to thank his mom for sending something that makes the angel this excited. A quick text to the mothership confirms the delivery, followed by the quiet, rhythmic sounds of a home-cooked meal being enjoyed. The plates don't stay full for long. It's a meal that hits that perfect balance of salty and sweet, leaving them both satisfied, though maybe a little more than just full. The silence after dinner isn't the usual comfortable quiet. Mahiru is leaning in, not just a polite tilt, but a full-body gravitational pull against Amane's arm. Her head bobs, her breathing is heavy, and Amane can feel his own heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He's staring straight ahead, frozen, wondering how the domestic routine suddenly turned into a full-contact sport. He looks down and sees the telltale flush creeping across her cheeks, her eyes half-lidded and wandering. The realization hits him like a splash of cold water. The alcohol in those sake lees didn't fully evaporate. He's currently sitting on a couch with an accidentally intoxicated angel. He attempts to maintain his composure, stammering out, Mahiru-san? Are you okay? She's trapped in a loop of drunken logic, complaining that she's burning up while simultaneously shivering. When Amane suggests sitting further away to cool down, she shoots that idea down with a drowsy, stubborn pout. She leans even harder into his side, whispering, I'm hot, but I'm cold. Amane is in the danger zone. He's hyper-aware of everything, the sweet, flowery scent of her hair, the terrifying softness of her weight against him, and the literal heat radiating through his hoodie. He struggles to remain the voice of reason, pleading for her to let go before his own brain short-circuits, but problematic is an understatement when your crush is currently melting into your side. She looks up at him with glassy, honest eyes, and the filter is officially gone. She admits she's jealous of his warmth, a quiet confession of how cold her own world usually feels. She's not just looking for a heater, she's looking for him. She leans her head back against his shoulder, sighing, I just wanted you to share some with me. The air in the room thickens, turning heavy with a vulnerability that has nothing to do with the sake. Amane doesn't pull away. Instead, his hand finds the top of her head, his fingers sinking into her soft hair in a gesture of pure, unscripted comfort. It's a silent promise in the dark, a moment where the angel and the loner disappear, leaving just two people finding home in each other's presence. Fast forward 1 hour, and the sake has evaporated, replaced by the sheer, soul-crushing weight of total recall. Mahiru is buried behind a pillow, her face a shade of red that suggests she might actually catch fire. She jumps up, frantic and mortified, shrieking, please forget it, while Amane just sits there wearing a smirk that says he's going to hold on to this memory for the next 50 years. Folding laundry is supposed to be a mindless chore, but today the routine has a snag. Mahiru stops, staring at the dark fabric in her hands like it's a puzzle she can't solve. It's huge, it's definitely his. Usually the angel is the definition of poise and efficiency, but curiosity is a persistent little ghost. She holds it up, measuring the sheer width of the shoulders against her own, and before her brain can file a protest, she's slipping into the heavy, oversized cotton just to see how deep the ocean really goes. The front door clicks open, and the silence of the apartment evaporates instantly. Amane walks in, shoulders slumped from the day, offering a casual I'm home. He stops mid-stride. Standing in the middle of his living room is Mahiru, looking less like a refined neighbor and more like a very small bird trying to survive a very large tent. The sleeves swallow her hands whole, and her face is already blooming into a frantic deep-sea red as the reality of her curiosity crashes into the floor. Amane's brain short-circuits. He looks from the hoodie to her face, finally managing a confused, "Why are you wearing that?" Mahiru doesn't just blush, she physically retracts, pulling the collar up like a defensive shell as if she could vanish if she just hides enough skin. Her eyes are darting everywhere but at him, her logic completely abandoned. She manages to choke out a desperate, "I'm sorry, while Amane frantically tries to backtrack, realizing he's accidentally cornered a very flustered angel. She peeks over the fabric, her voice small and trembling as she confesses the truth. It started with the laundry, the simple act of folding clothes that made her realize just how much space a man occupies in the world compared to her. She didn't mean for it to be a moment, she just thought to herself that his clothes were so unexpectedly big, and she wanted to know what that felt like. It's a confession of a whim, but the way she's gripping those oversized sleeves makes it feel like she's admitting to something much heavier. Amane watches her, the heat in her cheeks practically radiating across the room. He realizes that while she's technically borrowed his things before when she was taking care of him or during that long night in the dark, she's never actually had a chance to just experience the comfort of them. She looks vulnerable, wrapped in his scent and his size, and the sight of her hiding in his fabric hits him with a sudden, quiet weight in his chest. She holds her arms out, the sleeves flopping uselessly like she's a kid playing dress-up in her dad's closet. It's 155 centimeters versus 180, a mathematical reality that has never felt more obvious than it does right now. Amane can't help but point out that he is on the tall side, which only makes Mahiru's pout more pronounced. She's small, she's swallowed by cotton, and she's absolutely done with the laws of physics favoring him. Amane keeps staring, and the silence starts to feel a little too pointed. Mahiru fidgets, the fabric rustling as she asks what he's looking at, her heart probably hammering against her ribs. He's not judging her, he's just realizing that despite her constant apologies, she hasn't actually made a move to take the hoodie off yet. She likes the warmth, and she definitely likes the way it makes her feel safe. He lets a small, genuine smile slip, catching her off guard. "Want to wear it back to your place too?" he asks, his voice dropping the teasing edge for something softer. He adds that he doesn't actually mind, essentially giving her permission to keep this little piece of his world. It's a simple offer, but for Mahiru, it's like he just handed her the keys to a kingdom she didn't know she was allowed to enter. Something in Mahiru snaps, a sudden, fierce determination that replaces the shame. If he's going to be this casual about it, then she's going to be absolute. She looks him dead in the eye, her face still burning but her voice steady with a new, adorable kind of aggression. "I'll make this my loungewear," she declares, turning a moment of accidental curiosity into a permanent domestic claim. Amane is left blinking at the sheer intensity of her response, thinking to himself that she just said something kind of insane, but he can't bring himself to stop her. He just shrugs, telling her to use it however she likes with a soft laugh. Mahiru stands her ground, clutching the sleeves tight as she delivers the final blow. "I won't be giving this back, okay? It's not just a hoodie anymore, it's a tiny, oversized victory for the girl who finally found a place to belong." Every morning is a battle of good enough. For the school's angel, looking perfect is a chore, but looking perfect for Amane? That's a whole different level of anxiety. She knows he doesn't do flattery, which means every look he gives her is the unvarnished truth. She settles on a simple, elegant style and whispers to her reflection, "Let's go with this." She tries to tell herself it's not for him. She's just maintaining standards, right? But as she fiddles with her collar, the lie starts to slip. Her heart is racing over a hypothetical compliment she hasn't even received yet. She huffs, trying to kill the blush, thinking, "It's just to improve myself." The moment she walks into his place, the air changes. Amane doesn't say a word at first, just watches her with that steady, quiet focus that always makes her skin prickle. Finally, he breaks the silence, asking how she even got her hair to stay in such a complex braid. Mahiru looks away, heat creeping up her neck, and mutters, "Anyone can do it." Steam rises from the mug, but the real heat is coming from Mahiru's face. She sneaks a peek at him, her fingers twitching against her own neck. The silence is killing her, making her overthink every strand of hair and every button on her blouse. She finally cracks, her voice a small, trembling thread as she asks, "Does it look weird?" Amane sets his cup down, looking at her like she just asked if the sky was blue. He doesn't see the angel the rest of the school worships. He sees the girl who worked too hard on her hair and is now terrified of the result. He lets it out plain and simple, "Personally, I think it suits you." And then he goes and finishes her off. He doesn't just like the style, he thinks it's pretty cute. The words land with a heavy, tangible impact, sending a crimson wave crashing over Mahiru's face. She pinches her own cheek, desperate to find some grounding reality, barely able to squeak out a response. "Is that so?" Amane watches her short circuit, realizing that his honest opinions carry a lot more weight than he thought. She's staring at him with those wide, glossy eyes, vibrating with a mix of joy and pure mortification. He realizes she actually cares about his praise deeply. Pressure builds until the boiler finally explodes. Mahiru stands her ground, face glowing like a sunset, and shouts the truth she was trying so hard to hide. "I feel the happiest when you compliment me, Amane-kun." She says it with enough force to knock the air out of the room, leaving Amane absolutely stunned. Immediately, the regret kicks in. Mahiru dives into a cushion, curling into a tiny ball of shame while steam practically whistles from her ears. But Amane doesn't take it back. He leans in, his voice soft but unwavering. "I really do think you look pretty." For Mahiru, it's a total knockout. It's just not fair. The news is screaming about icy roads and transportation disasters, but Amane is busy having a private conversation with a pile of snow. Pat pat, the white fluff is perfect for packing, and for a second, he's not a cynical high schooler living alone. He's just a kid making a tiny frozen friend on his balcony. A sharp slide of the glass door cuts through the silence, and the angel descends with a look of pure domestic exasperation. She's bundled up in a thick, oversized sweater while he's crouching in the freezing air with nothing but a thin hoodie for protection. She stares him down, her voice dripping with concern. "What are you doing out here?" He tries to play it cool, brushing the snow off his hands with a casual smack, but his cheeks are already glowing red from the bite of the wind. He tries to argue that snow is a rarity, that he's just taking advantage of the day off, but Mahiru isn't buying the "it's fine" routine for a second. She leans in, eyes narrowing. "Did that not occur to you?" Amane tries to beg for a rain check on the lecture, but Mahiru's hand is already on his back, hurting him inside like a lost puppy. She isn't banning him from the snow, but she is banning him from being an idiot about the temperature. If he wants to play, he's going to do it without catching pneumonia. As the indoor heat hits him, the shivering finally starts, proving Mahiru right. He slumps onto the sofa, his hands looking like raw steak from the cold. She sighs, that "I'm not sure if you're lazy or just helpless" look firmly in place, and tells him to stay put while she handles the rescue mission. But she doesn't go to the kitchen yet. Instead, she drops into a crouch right in front of him, reaching out to envelop his frozen red hands in her own. The shock of her warmth is instant, a soft, pulsing heat that makes his pulse skip more than the cold ever could. She squeezes his fingers, looking up with eyes full of genuine worry. "See, they're so cold." Rub, rub. The rhythmic friction of her palms against his skin starts to bring the feeling back to his fingers, but the heat in his face is entirely new. She looks like she's about to cry over a simple case of cold hands, begging him to be careful because she can't stand the thought of him being hurt. Even the snow being pretty doesn't excuse him from the basic safety of gloves and hand warmers. Amane feels the tension getting too heavy, so he does what he does best. He makes it weird. "Are you my mom or something?" He cracks. The reaction is instantaneous. Mahiru's face goes flat, her hands pull away, and the kitchen is suddenly off limits. To get his hot drink back, Amane has to offer a full head-bowed apology and a promise to be a perfectly obedient customer. Mahiru has him exactly where she wants him. She leans in, a soft, triumphant smile blooming on her face as she delivers the kill shot with a gentle giggle. Good boy, it's patronizing, it's adorable, and it makes Amane's brain short-circuit as he watches her bounce toward the kitchen to reward his obedience with something warm. He doesn't let her have the last word, though. As she walks away, he calls out a specific request for a rich milk tea, dropping the defensive walls for just a second. "I love the way you make it." The words hit her like a physical weight, stopping her in her tracks. She tries to brush it off as him being a demanding customer, but the flush on her neck says everything. The house is warm, but the feeling between them is currently set to boiling.